I mean, bringing Texas and Oklahoma into the SEC is going to make it harder for, I would venture to say, a majority of the schools to get in the playoff.
Welcome to My Gotta Podcast. I'm Jim Wood. In this episode, John Powell and I are joined by Seth Emerson of The Athletic to discuss conference realignment, among other things. But before we get to that, John and I also took a few minutes to get caught up, as we hadn't talked to each other without a special guest in quite some time. As always, remember you can follow us on social media at My Gotta Podcast. And if you like what you hear, please subscribe, rate, 5 stars obviously, and review the show. If you leave us a review, you just might hear it on an upcoming episode. Now, let's join the conversation in progress. So what, when is the last time that it was just the two of us? I'm trying to think here. So we had...
Apparently we need guests. We need more guests.
We just had...
Because we're out of them.
We just had Logan. We had... What was before that? John and Hunter?
We had Logan, John, and Hunter.
Okay.
And we had Carter with Logan.
Carter with Logan. Well, yeah, I can't leave out the most famous of all.
The most famous Master Chief.
On the last. We had Chase. We had our. Oh, that was the under the My Gotta Podcast Stories brand. We had Chase and talked through all that.
Chase, yep, that's true. We had the iconic
and we
episode.
had the Dog Sports Live crossover. Yeah, so the last time it was just the two of us talking was our April 22nd post G-Day episode. So.
It's been a summer of special guests.
That's right. So, what? School started today for the kids, right?
It's the most wonderful time of the year, Jim. The kids are off to school. My oldest started 8th grade, and then I've got 4th grade, and then I've got 2nd grade, and then preschool. And it's all crazy, and the moms are all in their feelings about it.
It's the difference between, I guess not all of Georgia, because I know like my niece and nephew they're not back yet. Well, my niece and nephew that attend school at this point. My other nephew isn't in school yet, but they don't go back for a couple of weeks. They're in Forsyth County. But shoot, we don't go back here in North Carolina for like 3 weeks. So we're now, granted, we had 3 more weeks of school at the end of last year as compared to you guys, but we're still full summer mode. But we do have soccer practice starting up next week. So we're about to get back into the swing of things there.
So y'all start soccer before you start school?
Yeah.
I kind of wish that we did that, because we started school today, and today also happens to be the first day of soccer practice. Our first tournament this weekend.
We have okay, so that's basically how we're going to be, because we have soccer practice next week, and then that following weekend we've got a tournament. So
nice.
Same thing. So always good to get that 1 week under your belt. And
for sure.
This is like all new team for Lily too, like lots of new teammates. So tournament right off the bat, it should be interesting. Yeah, and then I just had so that niece and nephew I was speaking of, they were just here. Fripp Dog was here. Our girls were just in the play this last weekend. They were in High School Musical. High School Musical Junior, I guess they call it. So that was pretty cool. Had all the family was here and did some grilling on the Big Green Egg and went out to eat as well, and good times were had. And I will say, we were having we talked about my dad when we had Chase on, and have to report to Chase that my dad showed up in my front door wearing a 7-6 Apparel "We Run This State" T-shirt. So I was laughing. Still friend of the brand for 7-6 is Fripp Dog. So that was cracking me up.
That's awesome.
But I guess the other big development, right? The kind of drum roll moment is that you guys convinced me to drink bourbon.
Yeah.
I've been,
Welcome to Bourbon Twitter, Jim.
I've been the holdout. I've said I don't drink bourbon. I only do beer, and so you can talk about your bourbons, and I can talk about my beers. But my arm was twisted enough times, and shout out to the text thread. Went with John Tweets, aka Twitter handle change, now just simply John Smith. But we'll still say John Tweets because we can't stop. Made his recommendation, so I went with the Knob Creek 9 for my inaugural. I think that's the first bottle of bourbon I've bought. I mean, at least since like college. I can't really remember what, if any, I bought back then, but I think that was probably my first bottle.
Yeah, I think that your segue into it was a cocktail, wasn't it? It was a John Tweets cocktail, and now you're you put on your big boy pants and went straight.
That is true. I did the revolving door. I tried that back like at spring break. He had posted that, so that was like a cocktail with a rye, and then I did that again first with this new purchase, but then I don't know. I've got my ice molds. I've got my fancy ice, and did my sorry. I just got a direct message that is okay, sorry. I just got distracted by Logan Booker sent me something, and I couldn't figure out what in the world he was talking about, and it's the Peloton. So just got a Peloton message from Logan, and I couldn't figure out what the heck he was talking about. So that's what that was about. Anyways,
so now you're Peloton buddies?
Yeah, right. Yeah. There's a couple other dog Twitter people that we follow each other on the Peloton as well. Anyways, yeah. So now I've done like the straight pour just over the fancy ice, and I guess I would say I was pleasantly surprised. I mean, I needed it when I watched that SEC Saturdays in the South thing. When I watched the '90s episode, I needed a bourbon to make it through it because that was depressing. I think that was actually the time when I did my straight pour. Was that night?
Yeah, I gotta say, like the way that this has been described, that series was somewhat depressing because it's like it sounds like that they kind of forgot that Georgia was a big part of the SEC.
So it's good. You should definitely watch it. It's very well done. It's just that as it gets like the early stuff is a lot of stuff that like I didn't know, like when the SEC was founded, and you get to hear about like Sewanee, which was that team that won like I don't know, like 8 games in 6 days, or I got that backwards, 6 games in 8 days, or whatever it was, and all that kind of stuff's interesting. And you hear about like how they ended up leaving the SEC and why, and you get through that kind of stuff, and like you get stuff about when Georgia Tech was in the SEC and Tulane. So that stuff's all really interesting. And then it gets into more of the kind of stuff that we would know. And it's like the 80s episode is amazing because the first quarter of it is all about the 80 Georgia team, right? So that part's awesome. But then we were kind of in the wilderness, like in the 90s. I mean, we didn't do a whole lot, and it's definitely reflected in the show. What was disappointing for me was the 2000s one, because the 2000s, like the title name of that episode was something around like family, faith, and football. I'm going to butcher it, but it was something like that, right? And like it seemed like it fit with Mark Richt, right? Is what I thought when I saw the title of the episode. And then I guess it was something that Lou Holtz had said, whatever this quote was. And right. So the whole thing was, okay, so it's faith, family. Yeah, I had it. Faith, family, and football. And I guess that's something Lou Holtz had said. So the whole opening segment was about Lou Holtz. And I'm like, Lou Holtz? Like, we're talking all about Lou Holtz? And there was basically no mention of Mark Richt. I mean, the only mention of Mark Richt was the fact that we stormed the field in 2007 against Florida, and then that motivated Florida to beat us in 2008. Like that was like the only mention of it. So I don't know. That was frustrating. I actually haven't finished. I think I've got one more episode to watch. I haven't finished it yet, so I'll get to it. But yeah, I don't know. I would still recommend it. I would definitely watch it. It's worth the watch, but it gets frustrating for a little while.
Yeah, a little nauseating even.
Yeah. Well, yeah. The '90s part is brutal. The '90s part is brutal. But anyways, um, so I don't know what else has been going on with you.
Well, like I said, school getting back has been pretty impactful on our side. But yeah, no, we're just trying to get back in the swing of things. Each passing kind of event is a reminder of how close we are to football. We're
Yeah.
kind of winding down some of the Olympics, which have been kind of like scraping the bottom of the barrel as it comes to sports watching. Um, Last night, the U.S. won the Gold Cup, which is actually a pretty big feat for them, for my soccer fans out there. Um, but yeah, Manchester United has kicked off their preseason tour and picking up where they left off last year, with not performing very well. So I'm
Well,
I'm
hey,
excited for football.
we had Atlanta United's Miles Robinson had the winning goal in the Gold Cup, right?
That's true.
So
Yes,
that was good. That was good.
for the Atlanta United fans out there, that was certainly bitter. It was very nice on a number of levels, because what you had was, he didn't really get a whole lot of attention when Tata Martino was the head coach at Atlanta United, and so it was somewhat fitting. I joked about this on Twitter, and there's a bunch of other people that mentioned it as well. But um, did Miles Robinson just get Tata Martino fired so that he could come
I
back,
saw that.
so that he could come back and coach Atlanta United?
I saw that. I'm all over that.
I would absolutely love that conspiracy theory.
So I guess kind of bouncing around what's going on. So we had I know we talked a little NIL with Logan. We obviously had Chase on and got the story behind iconic brands or NIL there. And I know we saw I don't know, we saw, I guess, a big announcement. I don't know. So we got Keely Ringo is now officially I guess has an NIL deal with Bojangles. So how do you feel about that? Do we know what it means? Do we have any idea what it means? I have no idea what it means.
I don't know. My only guess is that the college kid gets some free food at a bare minimum. He'll get some chicken biscuits and probably some sweet biscuits and things like that. So I'm sure that he gets a little bit of action off of that deal in the form of food.
I'm sitting here like, okay, so I'm perusing the Bojangles Twitter feed, and one of the most recent Twitters, or one of the most recent tweets, is a retweet of, as we now know how to pronounce, DJ Uiagalelei. So he has tweeted and has tagged Bojangles and saying that he says, duh, you know that Bojangles dropped a new Bo's chicken sandwich. Fire emoji. Go get up and get you the best thing out right now. Multiple hashtags, and there's like a video of him eating it. So I'm assuming my understanding of how these things work, I mean, in general, he's probably getting, I guess they're getting paid. There's no telling. It could be on a per tweet basis, right? It could be X dollars per tweet, or they could have like a contract that says they have to tweet X tweets over some kind of amount of time or something. So I guess.
Oh yeah, are they on the? Are they on Drew Butler's?
On Icon Source?
Are they on the Icon Source? Yeah.
Probably. My God, a podcast is on Icon Source. So any athletes out there, if you want to reach out, we're on there.
we're big time. Kears Jackson.
Not. Well, I don't know if I can say that. Can I say that? He's not an Icon Source. Not last time I checked. Maybe I'll cut that out. We'll see. Yeah. So I guess we'll look for some Bojangles tweets coming from Keely Ringo. I would imagine that's what that's all about.
Right.
So what NIL deals do you want to see?
Do I want to see? Well, I can tell you off the top of my head, Jordan Davis has to be sponsored by Swedish Fish. you gotta have Jordan Davis on Swedish Fish. That's one thing that I would love to see. I would also think that there'd be a nice barbecue joint in the Athens greater area that might be interested in sponsoring an offensive lineman of sorts.
Yeah.
So
I'm still waiting for like I do want to see one. I don't know, and I guess maybe it's like the introduction of social media since the times we were talking about, right? Because when we had John and Hunter on, we were talking about like all the old like super cheesy coaches commercials, that there used to be, and like Jim Donnan had silly ones. Everyone I know like if you ever Google or like go on YouTube and look up like Bobby Knight commercials, like he
okay.
would pitch like anything, and so there's these like super cringy like hilarious commercials. So I guess I was kind of like thinking that we would see some stuff like that. And I don't know, maybe that stuff will come as the season goes on. Because I'm still waiting to see like, random local small business purchases advertising time on local TV station kind of deal. Like in Athens or whatever. I don't know. I feel like those would be funny, but I don't know that we'll see those because I guess maybe they'll just tweet out a video of themselves for the same business instead, as opposed to doing a full like commercial. I don't know. Right. I feel like it hasn't like, at least from my perspective, I feel like it hasn't like exploded. Like everyone's like, oh, it's going to be the Wild Wild West and things are going to be crazy. I mean, other than I think it hasn't been, to me, hasn't been crazy. Like we've seen the guys come out with their own brands, like all the guys that are going with Iconic. We've seen that in a couple of other places as well. We've heard the statement from Saban, that their quarterback has approaching seven figures or whatever, however he worded it. I still don't know what to believe that, but I don't think we've seen. It hasn't been like an influx to me, or maybe I'm not paying attention as much. But I haven't seen it be quote unquote crazy. And maybe that's just because the season hasn't started yet. I don't know.
So we talked a little bit about this in the text chain about whether or not are we 100% positive of whether or not these kids have to disclose their deals, or can they be as private as they want about it? I feel like that, like on the surface, you would have to disclose it to the school just so that they're like keeping tabs on everything, and and maybe even to a certain extent approving some of these, because you can't just like go off and be sponsored by a local liquor store or something like that, right? So like, I just really don't know how much policing is going on with some of this.
So are you saying basically like insert player has tweeted about some product and you just don't realize that it's because of an NIL deal? Is that what you were getting at?
Well, what I was saying is that maybe some of these guys have signed deals and just haven't disclosed it.
Oh yeah. No, yeah. I would imagine that's happening. I guess I'm just thinking like, I guess if that's the case, then maybe we just haven't seen that's like whatever they're going to do come to fruition yet. Right. Like,
right.
We haven't seen all the ads or whatever that could eventually come out of that. They just haven't hit whatever, right? Haven't hit social media, haven't hit TV just yet. We're still waiting on those. I mean, and that's certainly possible. I would say, they definitely don't have to go and announce like I've signed with whatever brand. I would assume they could, but I'm sure there's things I'm sure there are deals that have been struck that have not been announced yet. And so I don't know, maybe those are the kind of ones that we'll see the commercials and such come from down the line.
Right. I mean, the things that I'd be looking for are, some of the bigger names. Like, it's surprising to me that JT Daniels hasn't come out with something more like prominent, like, like Brock Vandegrift came out with, Onward Reserve was pretty quick there. Like, we've been joking, like, you got Bojangles sponsoring guys. You got the 7-figure deal from the Alabama quarterback. So like you've got Milo sponsoring Alabama and Auburn players. Which, by the way, what was the Bryce Young deal for? Like, do we even know what
No,
what
that's
was
the
the
thing.
sponsor on that?
He didn't say, and that's the whole thing where I still think it was like a recruiting ploy by Saban. Like, come to Alabama, be the quarterback, you can get $1 million NIL deal. Like he said nothing. He didn't give any like real information about it. The only thing we have seen from JT, or the only thing I've seen, was there. I saw pictures posted of him signing helmets. Did you see that? So he was doing like a signing. So he was signing a bunch of helmets, and they were going to sell them. And I know it sparked some debate on uniform Twitter because it was a Georgia helmet, but it was like matte black. Did you see that? It wasn't even a red helmet.
Yeah, I saw that. I thought it looked pretty sharp.
It looked sharp to have a signature on it, but how about be worn?
I thought it looked pretty sharp because you know, I don't know that we're going to wear that one, but like as a conceptual idea, I thought it looked pretty cool. I mean, I don't know that I would ever buy it, but it looked kind of cool. Just because
yeah.
I'm like a get off my lawn when it comes to that sort of thing. When you mess with the helmets, like we can go all over the place on some of the uniform stuff, whatever. I'm not a huge fan of the all red that kind of blew up there with Hunter recently, but when you start messing with the helmet though, yeah, I don't know about that. I don't know about that one, Chief.
Yeah, that's how I feel. The only one I have seen Hunter did a mock up, and I think Chase just resurrected it the other day. And it's basically a throwback. It's like a silver helmet, which is what the helmet was before it was the red helmet. So we used to actually wear silver helmets, and it's got like a block letter G on it. I think they were saying like maybe a homecoming kind of deal, but I don't know. I don't know. Everyone says, don't mess with the helmet, which I tend to, in general, I agree with. So, but you mentioned the Hunter red pants. I mean, again, I'll say again, there's nothing like being tagged in one of Hunter's uniform threads. I think that was the craziest one that I've ever seen. I mean, it was like 2 days later, I was still getting notifications on that by people who were just outraged by the. So for those who were not tagged and did not see the Twitter thread, there was some recruits in town recently taking pictures in like the normal red home jersey with the throwback red pants that were worn at Arkansas last year. And so Hunter, I think threw a grenade into Twitter and said, "All right, Twitter, how do you feel? What would you do if the Dogs run out of the tunnel wearing this in Charlotte against Clemson?" And like, I mean, all hell broke loose on Twitter. It was crazy. Many get off my lawns. Many red pants are okay with the white jerseys. No red on red. Lots of I don't know. It went on forever. That was comical. So thank you, Hunter. I'm always here for it. I definitely don't want to make it sound like I'm complaining when I say that there's nothing like being tagged in it. I'm here for it. I love it. I get a kick out of it.
I'm actually impressed by the self-awareness that he had on that.
Yeah.
Right. Are you the fact that he knew what he was doing is probably one of the bigger pieces of like, wow, I can't believe he knew that was going to happen, because he warned us. He warned us. I'm going to throw a grenade in uniform Twitter. Watch this. And we were all like, just ha 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 ha. Sure, go for it.
Yeah. Right.
Oh dear Lord, what happens when Hunter tosses a grenade at uniform Twitter?
It was amazing. Well, I don't know. I was kind of perusing Twitter to see if there was anything else going on. I'm not really seeing a whole lot, but I guess the two things are: one, the kid that's going to go to Ohio State, like now, right, is actually like foregoing his senior year of high school, has enough credits to graduate, and is going straight to Ohio State right now. I think it sounds like a big part of it has to do with the fact that I guess he's in Texas, right? And in Texas, you can't capitalize on NIL in high school because it would actually make you ineligible. And so he wants to go ahead and start college now to have NIL, get NIL money, I guess, whatever, now. which is definitely something I didn't think about when you talk about like impacts of NIL, right? That's not something that did cross my mind. We've had kids for years graduating high school a semester early, and being there for spring ball. Although I think JT Daniels actually like reclassified and graduated high school early as well. So I guess it's been happening, but I know we may see it happen even more now with NIL. We'll see.
Yeah, no, it is interesting because you've got these guys that are. I mean, I think that I was posting some conjecture with you earlier on this. Was, are they going to walk on, or are they going to reclassify? I think in the case of this guy, he's reclassifying, right? So he's going to literally fill a roster spot as opposed to just coming in, walking on, and pick up your scholarship next year kind of thing. And that's going to be something that's going to be interesting to watch schools navigate some of that because, I don't pay attention to Ohio State's recruiting or their roster management, but if he's coming on board as part of this year's class, that means that they had to have had an open scholarship for him. Otherwise, you'd be left with a numbers crunch kind of situation where it's like someone's going to be left with the short end of the stick in that merry-go-round. You know what I mean? Because that's one thing that Kirby's been really good with is managing the numbers, and that's been probably one of the quieter upgrades from the Richt era. Was we had guys that we had scholarships left over after in the middle of the summer, because I can remember, we were awarded scholarships to all these different players and stuff, and it's like, wait, what? So we had open scholarships that we could have navigated, and we didn't. So. To me, that means that if you're doing stuff like that, then that means that there's a bit of a roster management problem going on there, in my opinion, because you plan these things out. And I recognize that the name, image, likeness has thrown a wrench in some of this, so you can't exactly plan for that. But it just means that the coaches are now going to have to think about that. Like, if you're offering scholarships to these kids, are they going to graduate early and expect to come in? You know what I mean? That's going to be part of the decision-making process, which, as we all know, adding more elements for decisions for 18-year-olds is probably not the best of things for people that follow such recruiting environments and need to be talked off the ledge.
Oh, something just popped in my head that I know I meant to bring up that I totally forgot about our last episode. So I have to give credit to Robert Wolf, Dog Fan 1980. For calling out the ending of our last episode on Twitter. So I think he said something to the effect of he noticed that we ran out of quarters on our call. So yes, when we had Logan Booker on, it was my fault. We had kind of finished what we wanted to talk about for the podcast, but then I hit stop before we all said go Dogs or anything. So that was my bad. I probably should have had an outro or something, because it definitely ended kind of awkwardly. So, and you know what? I definitely welcome all call outs. If you want to call us out for something, totally fine with that. I got a huge kick out of that. I thought that was awesome.
Because you yourself would call people out too.
Well, yes, that was always my move. I've kind of dialed that back a little bit. Although I don't know, have I? I guess in the summer there's not as many podcasts out, but I definitely have not been doing that. But I definitely have been known to point things out about other podcasts. Although I don't know, I feel like I've been kind of annoying about it. So because mine was more like you said this and it was wrong.
It was more aggressive.
Right. Which again, to Logan's point, no need to argue about such things on Twitter.
You've become a better person for it, Jim.
That's right. And then the other thing is that I remembered or wanted to make sure we talked about was we did get a new review in. So we always say in the opening that if you leave us a review, we will read it. So we got a new review, 5 stars from Jones Dog, and so I will read it. Yes. The title of it is just "Thank you." So first off, Jones Dog, you're welcome. I guess we'll say there. So the review says, "Needed another Georgia podcast. I cut a lot of grass for people in my neighborhood and really enjoyed listening to my first episode today. Saw you guys on YouTube at the gym and gave you a try. Thanks for what you do. Go Dogs. So I think we hadn't read this on here, but I did tweet that out. And my assumption is that if they saw us on YouTube, they saw us on the Dog Sports Live crossover where we did our playoff expansion crossover with Graham and Josh. So also shout out to the guys over at Dog Sports Live and to Jones Dogs Gym for showing Dog Sports Live. I don't know if this is their home gym or do they go to a gym where Dog Sports Live is featured on YouTube. I feel like I need a little bit more information. So Jones Dog, reach out. We're curious.
I'm assuming he had YouTube up on his cellular device.
That makes sense. That probably makes more sense. Mystery solved. Okay, so back to where I was perusing Twitter. I think the biggest thing that went around today was it was PFF College had tweeted out that that Clemson and Florida State have reached out. I think was the terminology to the SEC that they are also interested in joining the SEC. So we've already got the official. I think when we talked to Logan, it was speculated, right? And we had the reports, and we kind of knew that it might happen. But at this point, all that is official. Invitations extended to Oklahoma and Texas, and invitations accepted. So that'll happen in 2025 at the latest. But now we're starting to hear that potentially other teams are reaching out as well.
Right. I think that I don't know. I think that's something that will be interesting to watch if we start seeing it picked up by some more substantiated sources. You know what I mean? Yeah,
for sure. And so with that, I don't know. What do you say we bring in Seth Emerson to talk to us about that, John? What do you think?
Oh, you don't say. It just so happens we've got him on the horn.
But yeah, Seth, I don't know. I guess I'm trying to think of when there was a tweet. I think it was what PFF College was saying that Clemson and Florida State have reached out, I think was the way it was worded. So I don't know if you had even seen that.
Oh, I don't think that kind of story breaks on some random guy's Twitter feed or whatever. That kind of thing, like, it gets leaked intentionally to, not that the Texas-Oklahoma thing was leaked to the Houston Chronicle. It was more the Houston Chronicle was looking into it this is the way Brent Winterman has explained it. He was doing some 10-year look back because he covers Texas A&M stories. And in the course of writing it, someone told him, hey, you need to check into this. And at that point, someone said, hey, as long as he's thinking of writing it, we're going to confirm it for him. That's how that happened. But it's not some random dude. There's been a lot of, I saw this 10 years ago, and we've seen it in this round of realignment where some really random people / outlets try to kind of, make a name for themselves or throw a bunch of stuff up against the wall and hope they get some of it right.
Got it. Yeah, I know. I saw you tweet about that the other day. That's always interesting. I guess with this, like, one thing I guess I always say, and I've been reading all your stuff on The Athletic, Seth, and I mean, including your Q&A that you did from Friday, which the answers from Moorhead I thought I guess it was interesting the way everything was answered.
The Q part was good, I guess, is what I've been told. There was a Q. There wasn't so much an A in that.
Yes, you succinctly, you said that much more succinctly than what I was getting to. But I mean, ultimately, like I always kind of say with this kind of stuff, it's like, why are we doing this? And I always say, follow the money. The answer is money. I mean, like, is there like, but you always want there to be something else too. I mean, like, who is benefiting other than, I guess, Texas and Oklahoma from this, other than just everyone could make more money? Because I'm having a hard time seeing like what the quote unquote upside is, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, I'd be curious what you all think from the standpoint of Georgia. I think Georgia is one of those schools that's going to be okay. Alabama, even in the post-Nick Saban era, probably okay. Florida, LSU. But after that, I mean, bringing Texas and Oklahoma into the SEC is going to make it harder for, I would venture to say, a majority of the schools to get in the playoff. And it just seems to me like arguably a short-sighted decision by a lot of people. I mean, I see from a money standpoint, and from if you're the SEC office, if you're Greg Sankey in Texas and Oklahoma reach out to you, I mean, what are you supposed to do? I mean, your job as the conference commissioner is to make your conference the best.
Right.
And I've written this a couple times that when nobody is in charge of college sports, everybody's going to look out for themselves. So Texas and Oklahoma were looking out for themselves, although they're making their life, their path more difficult now. They could have just dominated the Big 12, but they're looking out for themselves by getting more money. SEC is looking out for itself by making itself stronger. But I would argue that so many of these schools, the Missouris, the South Carolinas, I mean, Kentucky can lean on basketball, so I kind of see their vantage point. Vanderbilt didn't have a chance anyway. But Mississippi State, Ole Miss, those schools, Arkansas, are trading hope for money.
Mm-hmm.
And if I were in their shoes, I wouldn't be crazy about this.
That's kind of how I was feeling. It doesn't, so I don't know, I guess you agree with me, but that doesn't give me the warm and fuzzies, but good to hear. I guess thanks for the input there. And I mean, yeah, I would agree. Like, we're talking from the Georgia perspective. I would, from a competitiveness standpoint, I would agree. Like, I guess not a big difference, but I guess like sentimental and I don't know, just history and such. I mean, I'm worried about the rivalries. And so Seth, I mean, when I reached out to you, like, because you had, I think, replied or retweeted my tweet from Friday, right, where someone had said, we need to make sure, like, priority one is protect the in-state rivalries. And my thought was, okay, it's more than that. We can't have Georgia Auburn stop, have that rivalry cease. And that's what concerns me. I don't know, I guess reaction to that.
No, I mean, and I agree. I think there's number one, you need to protect that if you're Georgia. Number two, you need to give your fan base a more diverse schedule. Mm-hmm. And if they keep divisions and just bring Auburn and Alabama to the east and move Missouri to the west, the good news is there you lose the Missouri game because that game's no fun.
Right.
That's just a terrible trip unless they sometime in the future expand the Columbia, Missouri airport so that we can fly directly in there on Friday. Otherwise, that's just a hell of a trip. I hate it. Every now and then it's fine, but in 2012 it was neat. But every trip since then it's been like, come on, why are we doing this?
Got it. Right. Yeah.
Like, dude, so if you do that, that's one thing. You add Alabama every year. You keep Auburn. But do you really need to play Kentucky and Vanderbilt every year? And Kentucky, Kentucky, people like the Keeneland trip every other year. I get that. But I think that if you play every team in the SEC, if you set it up so you've got a core group of teams that you play every year, but then you rotate everybody else so that player will come in as a freshman and will be guaranteed to play a game at every SEC stadium if he's there over the course of 4 or 5 years. That's very doable. Go to a 3 or 4 team pod system where you play the same 3 or 4 teams every year and you rotate the rest of your games, and it's very doable. Keeping divisions, even if you go to a 9th game, that doesn't fix it mathematically. So I think as far as what realignment does, I don't like it, but there's a possibility that it will pay off and there'll be a benefit to it if they handle this the right way. And we'll see. What I've been told is there's a lot of moving parts, and there's a lot that they have to work through. But that at the moment, the betting favorite, maybe light betting favorite, but the betting favorite is they are going to go to pods, which would be good news.
Okay. And with it being a pod, it basically just means it's for scheduling purposes only. It's not like I win my pod, I advance, or anything like that.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah. No, I mean, you can't have 4 divisions and then a mini playoff because there isn't the. I mean, I think if the SEC keeps growing, maybe they can do that. I've wondered in my mind, like, what if the rest of the country gets so ticked off at the SEC for what they did that they say we're going to limit the amount of teams in the new 12-team playoff. The SEC says you can't do that, and so they both kind of stop off into their corners. And at the end of the year, the other conferences do their own playoff. The SEC can then do its own playoff, and then maybe they meet for the national championship. If you're the rest of the country, that may actually be a preferable option, because then you guarantee that it's not a 2 SEC team championship game, which under the current setup, there's a decent chance it would be.
Mm-hmm. True.
Yeah, it seems like that the SEC is really starting to form its own super league, especially if, I mean, granted, I know we started off talking about the rumor mill with Clemson and Florida State, but we were conjecting that a little bit. If you were missing any teams to make things more interesting for the group, including a team like LSU, including FSU. A team like Clemson into the equation makes things that much more interesting from a scheduling standpoint. It keeps the season ticket holders happy, that kind of thing, and it kind of keeps those rivalries that would otherwise be lost if we expanded the schedules and things like that. Then all of a sudden Florida's like, well, we have to get rid of Florida State now. Well, if Florida State's in the fold, then that eases some of that burden.
Yeah, well, I mean, the thing with Clemson and Florida State, again, these are some random reports that are out there.
Right.
I wouldn't really put much stock in them, but I think the ACC has a grant of rights that ties them in until like 2035. Oklahoma and Texas are tied in until 2025. So it was a little easier for them to move to the SEC and then try to figure it out so they can get in a few years sooner. We're talking 15 years out for any ACC school. So
right.
I don't know about that, but when you talk about scheduling, I mean, I've kind of gone back and forth with people on Twitter about this and my columns too. There's this tendency to think a 9th SEC game just fixes everything, and I've kind of explained why it doesn't if you keep divisions. But also, if you add another SEC game, something's going away. Now, so everyone says, well, just replace the guarantee games. Get rid of the Charleston Southern, et cetera games. Like, okay. Do you think schools are going to do that? Or do you think they're going to get rid of the marquee games that they've scheduled? Because there's a reason you do the guarantee games.
Yep.
And your coach is sitting there saying, hold on, you're going to take away one of our guaranteed wins where we get to develop our younger players and rest our veterans, and you're going to replace it with a harder game? So, yeah, I mean, I don't think Georgia Tech is going to go away. I don't think Florida State's going to go away. But before all this, Georgia had scheduled Texas and Oklahoma. Georgia has scheduled Florida State. Georgia has scheduled Clemson for 2 neutral site games and a home-and-home series. So those are the games that are in danger of going away if you go to a 9th SEC game. So a lot of people should be kind of careful what you wish for here.
Yeah, and I was trying to figure out, Seth, when I tried to figure out if we went to a 9-game schedule with the new expansion, could we make it work? Because that way you could play, again, if you move Alabama and Auburn to the east, Missouri to the west, then you eliminate the Iron Bowl going away, Georgia, Auburn going away, or Alabama, Tennessee. I think those are the 3 that people are most worried about. LSU, Florida is probably the next one that would go away annually. But then, even then, if you have 2 opponents on the other side and you rotate kind of like one on, one off like it used to be, then that still takes, I think, 8 years to get through the whole cycle of playing every team home and home, which to your point earlier, sure would be nice if, if a 4-year player, right, could play everywhere. And it definitely doesn't solve that problem. You'd only get through half of it, which I think would still stink. It's.
Yeah, I mean, if you make it a whole big kind of master plan where you go to a ninth game, but you also go to pods, then I think people will be swimming in like joy with the how many times you'll be able to go see Georgia play at Texas A&M and see Texas A&M play here again, and be able to go play different. I mean, it's gonna be like a little bit more like basketball where you see these teams at least once. You won't literally be able to do that in football. But I also think there's a way to do it within 8. You can get that if you stay at 8 games. And then, I mean, I don't know what we're getting on SEC teams about. Like, I think there's this perception nationally that SEC teams are just coasting by with these easy schedules, but they're not paying attention. It's almost like this cognitive dissonance. They're not paying attention when Georgia plays Notre Dame. They're not paying attention when Alabama plays these, these neutral site openers. What was it against Wisconsin last year? They're kind of looking past that Georgia is playing Clemson open this year, and how many times this happens. Like they don't give the SEC credit for when they do that. They just knock the SEC when their teams are playing Charleston Southern, and it doesn't really matter. It's just something we talk about. But now, if the SEC is going to go to a 9th game just to satisfy the rest of the country, so they get off them about expansion, I think that would be short-sighted.
Yeah, for sure. Go ahead, John. Your racism.
Oh no, I was just gonna say, like, I mean, as a if you were to ask me how I felt about this, like, I mean, as an unbiased observer, I would definitely prefer to have the marquee games. like as a fan, as a neutral, I feel like that the average person, and probably more importantly, and we haven't said the quiet part out loud, is ESPN probably would prefer to have the premier matchups too. So I do think that there's going to be the little bit of element of driving factor in some of the decision making that goes on, right?
Yeah. Like if you do this, what again? Simply going to a 9th game, if you're the TV people, if that's going to make Georgia stop scheduling Clemson and Florida State, and before this Texas and Oklahoma, who else do they have? Ohio State. Is Georgia going to cancel Ohio State so that it can play Ole Miss? Like, if you're ESPN, which game do you prefer?
I guess on an annual basis that could potentially change, but yeah, I don't know. I think where do you see it? Where do you see it ending? Do you see like conferences like merging and things like that? Like, what do you think the grand vision is here?
I'm not sure there is one. I think people assume this is part of some grand vision, but my read on it is that Texas and Oklahoma were unhappy in the Big 12. And a lot of it went back to when the Big 12 reached out to ESPN and Fox about a new TV deal, and ESPN and Fox were like, "Nah, we're good. We'll talk to you when the time comes." And Texas and Oklahoma said, "Well, this isn't working for us." And they reached out to the SEC, and the SEC, whether you think it's good or not, said, "Well, Texas and Oklahoma are interested in us, so we have to pursue it." And I think that's all it is. Now, it may lead to something else, but I don't think it's part of any grand machinations behind the scenes for something larger.
And was it the same? I'm trying to remember, like the last cycle. I mean, was it pretty much the same thing, but just dominoes fell and ended up happening in multiple conferences? And just from the standpoint of not any kind of master thing, but everyone's looking out for themselves. And last time it evolved into multiple conferences expanding.
Yeah.
Just arms race kind of stuff.
That's the way I remember it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's the way I remember it last time. Is I think there was one visionary person involved in all that, and that was Larry Scott, the Pac-12 commissioner, who was trying to turn it into the big Pac-16 and go get all the Texas schools, the marquee Texas schools, plus Oklahoma schools. And when that deal broke up, Larry Scott ended up adding Utah and Colorado. And those are good geographically; they're a fit, but they weren't marquee. And the Pac-12 is irrelevant in football now. And Texas A&M went to the SEC, and I mean, I think the world of Mike Slive. I think he was great. I'm not sure he was this visionary when it came to that. I think Texas A&M expressed interest, and much like Greg Sankey now with Texas and Oklahoma, it was like, you want to come? Yeah, of course. And then they went and got Missouri because they needed a 14th team, but also I think the school president of the SEC really liked the idea of Missouri academically being in there, and so that was a good way to round it up.
Got it. Interesting. No, I appreciate all the insight and also kind of validating that from the last round. But I want to be respectful of your time. Do you have a minute for just a couple of non-expansion questions?
Yes.
Okay.
Please, actually.
Okay. Yeah. So.
I was just about to say, I imagine you're probably tired of writing about this and talking about this, because if you in a perfect world, like what would you do? Like Seth Emerson is in charge of college football. What would you do? And then we'll move on.
I like regional conferences. I think that, putting it succinctly, and I put this in my column, if they're trying to move to this super leagues kind of thing, that's like a mini NFL, then it's going to suffer in the comparison to the real NFL. You need to keep what makes college football unique, and some people think better. I think they're both good, but college sports, college football is unique because of the geography and the regional rivalries. And I mean, if you told me this ended up in 4 16-team leagues, I guess I could live with it, but I kind of like it being spread out even a little more. I mean, I think 4 16-team leagues to me would have been better if Texas and Oklahoma weren't two of the 16 in the SEC, because at that point it becomes too strong. I would have preferred I might have preferred the whole Pac-16 concept from before, but even then, Texas shouldn't be in the Pacific. I think 5 or 6 big leagues is kind of the way to go. I kind of like it when you had the Southwest Conference and the Big 8, and you had smaller leagues and things were more intimate. And if you go to a 12-team playoff, then guess what? There's room for 8 or 9 conference champions and 2 or 3 clearly good wild cards. I mean, I'm not a traditionalist, as in like never, get off my lawn, whatever. I love the 12-team playoff. I always wanted a playoff. I think 12 is a perfect number, but I don't like 12-team playoff drawing out of like 2, 3, 4 super leagues. I mean, there's that then is becoming, in my mind, really devaluing the regular season.
So you're only quietly get off my lawn.
I say get off my lawn, Seth, all the time. So I'm that guy. Full disclosure. But John, I think you had an actual Georgia football question.
I did. Seth, we talked with Logan recently as well, Logan Booker, and one of the things that we were asking him was, you were at SEC Media Days, right? So like,
yes.
Who in your circles are you guys most excited to see? Like, who are you personally, and who are people talking about that we maybe haven't heard a whole lot about, or that people are just kind of quietly talking amongst themselves? Like, who are you excited to see?
I don't know that we really talked about that. We talked more about, making sure everyone was vaccinated.
Right.
So, we want to make sure we're not giving JT Daniels the COVID.
Right.
But, it's impossible not to be really curious about Eric Gilbert and how he fits in, and how that works. I did my offensive depth chart story. I just finished writing it. It'll be up on The Athletic probably by the time this airs. Going around and seeing all the different receiver options was intriguing. Defense is intriguing. I want to see how they handle some of these moving parts on defense, guys that can play multiple positions, and how they move guys around. Like Adam Anderson had, 6.5 sacks last year with some of the fewest snaps of any contributor on defense. I want to see how many snaps he has and how he converts that into not even just sacks, but like pressures and havoc rate and stuff like that. He's to me the most intriguing guy on Georgia's defense.
I would agree with that. He's definitely been one that we've been hoping for a nice breakout like David Pollock type season. David Pollock 2002 type season.
Well, it's interesting too with him getting older. Like I feel like just yesterday, Channing Tindall was the freshman we were talking about, and now he's a senior. Like I don't know, time flies. And I guess it also just speaks to the depth that we've had, right? But I'm glad to hear you say Anderson. That's definitely one of the guys we're looking out for. Yeah, and then just out. I don't know. Like, what about the transfers coming in and I guess acquiescing to system and team culture, et cetera? Is that a concern at all?
I haven't heard anything bad yet, but I think that is a legit concern. You've got three guys that were used to playing they were starters. Now, Eric Gilbert was only for 1 year, so he's a guy who's more likely, I think, to come in and kind of not try to take over right away and not have too much of an ego about it. And Darian Kendrick and Tyke Smith are going to play on defense. They're going to start, but they're guys that are used to being among, I think they're kind of, I don't know if I'd say expecting to come in and be some of the key guys on defense or the two or three leaders. But, how are things going to go when things aren't going as well? What if they lose to Clemson? Does it result in any egos in the locker room and finger pointing when, in fact, it doesn't really matter? You could lose to Clemson and still waltz into Atlanta 11-1 with a chance to make the playoffs.
Right.
I am curious about those kind of things. They are experimenting a little bit by having so many new guys introducing themselves into a locker room where you do have a lot of veterans already. And so it's something to watch.
Well, Seth, I really appreciate your time. I want to make sure we tell everyone where to go check you out. So Seth W. Emerson on Twitter. I'm assuming most of our listeners already subscribe to The Athletic. We talk about you like every show, by the way. We're always referencing and saying to read your stuff because we are big fans. And then the book is out, Attack the Day. Seth, I wanted to say personally, thank you. I know you did a lot with Avid Bookshop when it came out. I'm actually a high school graduate classmate with Janet, who owns Avid. So I just wanted to say thanks. Right. So old friend. So that was really cool. So thanks for that. Cool. And then as you're also a fellow New Edition fan, I had to get that in. So you and I share love of New Edition and all of the offshoots. Can I ask who is your favorite, down the line group, I guess, spinoff from New Edition? Do you have a favorite? Or do you even care?
Group per se
let me say ACT. How about ACT, right? Because it could be solos.
Well, I always said I was a Ralph Tresvant guy, and
okay.
I guess I still feel that way, but I mean, as time has gone on, I've kind of appreciated that the catalog for Bobby Brown was more, especially for Don't Be Cruel. I mean, there was so much good stuff in that, when you go to Every Little Step and Brony and Rockwitcha and everything. They were, they literally all were good. They all had a great first album when they left New Edition, and then nothing ever is good. Like their second album's all tanked.
True.
Which was too bad.
That's very interesting. That's awesome. Yeah, I always, for me, it was always between either Bobby Brown or Belle Biv DeVoe. But I would also, I think I would put Don't Be Cruel above the album Poison if you put them up head to head. Although those two were both excellent for me. But at any rate, I like to take us off the rails occasionally, Seth, and I knew you were a fan of them. So.
Well, if you're going to go off the rails, I approve of it.
This is not. I'm trying to bring back the damn good tangent just for you, Seth. So try to do that. And if you need anyone to recommend anyone over at The Athletic to bring back the damn good podcast, hit me up because I listened to every episode of that, and
Thank you.
I don't know. I can give you some talking points. Or I don't know. I could back up that if that ever needs to resurrect.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, Seth, this has been great. Appreciate you taking some time out of your day to talk to us. Very informative, and thanks so much.
All right. Thanks, guys. Enjoyed it.
Go Dogs.
You can say it. I can't.
That's fair. Thanks, Seth.